So, this episode, I'm entitling it The Loneliness Epidemic. It is a topic I was going to I was just going to chat about it on TikTok, but then I was like, I need a little bit more space to kind of talk about um, this topic because I think it's a little bit more expansive than what you could do on TikTok. So, I was scrolling through as I do, and I saw this conversation that a young lady was having where she was talking about being feeling that she was she didn't have enough physical affection in her life. She was saying something to the effect of being starved for hugs, and not starved in an attention seeking way, but literally like she had not been hugged or touched um, in quite some time. As a matter of fact, she said she couldn't remember the last time someone had hugged her or touched her. And she was in tears. It was the most I just it was the most I don't know. I just it got to me to see, and she was young too. She was pretty young. Um it got to me to watch her talk about this and just say, she's around people, but she hadn't been hugged. Or just even like some type of affectionate touch in a while. Now, I can't remember. I think some of it turned into it being, um, both intimate touch and like family, friends, that kind of thing. I often see, um, I've seen some guys talk about that too. Some men just kind of discuss how they haven't they haven't had that right amount of affection. And then on a more kind of lighthearted note, I saw something on Threads and it was a young lady saying she was Gen Z, and she was saying, man, that she went to go party with some millennials and maybe some Gen X folks. And she's like, man, they know how to party. Like they're dancing. And she's like, when I go to the club with people my age, like they're standing around and they're just on their phones and they're not having fun. And she said, she's talking about her generation, Gen Z. She's like, what is going on? Like, why don't we know how to party? And I started thinking about that because I also a large amount of my work is with women. And so I'm always kind of talking from that perspective. But obviously, this goes over into men as well. But I'm not going to speak from a male perspective because I'm not a man. And I, I, I have a certain amount of male clientele, but they don't come to me with this issue. So it started making me wonder and just think a little bit. Now, nothing that I'm about to talk about is research based, um, in that way, but it's based on experience that I have in talking with my clients. And what I'm finding is it's interesting because I'm seeing this newer generation, and I say newer because I'm Gen X, um, I'm seeing them start to cry out for wanting more intimate connections, more fulfilling connections. And I find that interesting because for the past few years, there's been this push towards I'm an introvert, which most people incorrectly assign themselves that label. There's a push towards, I mean, there's been whole conversation about the person that I'm dating, I don't need to talk to them every day. There's conversation about like not going out with friends. Like there's this whole conversation consistently around not connecting with people. And then now you're kind of like wanting to cry about being starved for intimacy. And it makes no sense to me. And I'm wondering if the correlation is clear. Because it's kind of crazy. Because what did you think the end result would be, right? So you're dating someone. I think it's hard to have this conversation when the concept of dating is so convoluted. People think because you went on a date, you're dating. No. You're dating in the sense of you are open to going on dates. Are you dating that person you went on 1 to 2 dates with? No, you're not. You have been on a few dates with this person, but you're not established dating. You are a dater, meaning that you are open to going on dates. I'm finding that people misassign, I don't know if that's a word, but we're going to use it. They incorrectly assign um their encounters, right? So, and it makes love bombing easy. It makes all of those things easy, right? So because you're stepping into these encounters, because I don't want to call them all relationships, because that's where things get convoluted, right? So you meet, let's say, and we're going to take this from a woman's perspective. Let's say you meet a guy and he asks you on a date. So you go on the date. You've been out one time. You're not dating. You went on one date with a man you just met. He is not your friend. He's not even an associate. He is a man you just met. And I think where it gets confusing and muddled for people is that they think that any kind of, it's been kind of established that like any kind of connection, it means something, and it doesn't. It's simply a man you are texting. That's it. And because I've seen that as well, like people are like, oh, we've been texting off and on for like the past few weeks. That's not dating. It's not dating. That's not even a real connection. That is a person that you are texting. That's it. That's not your man. That's nothing, because they can say anything over those words. You don't know how they act in real life. You don't know how they operate. You don't know anything about their ins and outs outside of that text connection. Maybe you video chat from time to time. Somewhere, somehow, people have established that as long distance dating. That is a person that you can maybe form a portion of a friendship with on video chat. That's it. Because you have not intertwined in each other's day-to-day lives. in a way that makes anything substantial, because a lot of the realness comes when you are in each other's space on a day-to-day basis. And so we've allowed, there was a show, oh gosh, I can't think of the name of it now, and it hasn't come back on this season. But there was a show that was on last year. It was really good entertainment. And they were taking these couples that had been online dating, and they brought them to this house for like a couple weeks or whatever. And there was like one couple that had been dating online for like 10 years. You're not dating. That's like a pen pal for 10 years. Can you develop affection for someone? Yes, but like, what is your day to day? There was a couple that had been dating, air quotes, for 5 years, online, video chats and stuff. They lived in the same city, and not once had they gotten together. That was strange to me. Um, there was a couple that I think they had been talking off and on for like a year. And what was interesting was the couple who had been talking off and on for a year, they're the ones that actually made it um after the show. It was just because they were talking off and on for like a year because they had some life circumstances where they couldn't quite get to the same city, and then they kind of used the show to say, you know what, let's make this jump and let's see if it gels in person. And they decided it did, and so then they went ahead and combined their lives, which they had already planned to do after whatever those life circumstances were. So that one was like the most realistic one. The others, it made me say, like, how do you consider yourself dating someone that you don't encounter on a day-to-day basis? This is how we have created, we've turned pen pals. Pen pals used to be a thing when we would write letters, and I don't know that Gen Z really knows about pen pals, but that was a thing when um we would write letters. You would have pen pals, PEN, and you guys would write letters back and forth and send postcards and stuff. And this was a person that you kind of maybe got to know through letters, but you didn't live in the same place all the time. It was actually something that they used to encourage for us through, I think it was like elementary school, where you would go through this list and you would get a pen pal and you would write each other and talk. You formed a friendship. Maybe you even picked up the phone and called. But I mean, obviously we didn't have video chat then, but it was like a whole thing. But they didn't necessarily live near you or anything like that. So there's but so much you can connection you can establish. And it's interesting in this day and age because we have the means for travel. Now, does everybody have the resources? No, but we do have the means for travel. And so we now have this space where people are like, you know, there's no vulnerability. I want vulnerability. Like, they're asking to bring back these things that they purposely extracted from relationships. And they're asking to bring back these things as if they are a novel idea or some type of new idea. No, we always had those things in relationships. Somewhere along the line, it was decided that those things needed to be stripped. And that could have been for a purposeful agenda, some way, somehow, to destroy families and things like that for a greater agenda. That could be a whole other conversation. But now there's just kind of this loneliness epidemic. And it's just it's interesting to me because people pushed for so long. I remember, growing up in the 80s and 90s, there was always that there were these different archetypes, right? Like you had the the pretty girl, and you had the kid who was the athlete, and you had the popular kids, and like you had like all of these different archetypes, and one was always the loner, right? There was like the loner or like the eccentric kids. There were like all these different archetypes, and a lot of the 80s movies were made off of, kids who were loners or black sheep. There was like this whole thing about how that was cool, and that was cool for a long period of time. And then more recently, now we have the archetype of the auntie, right? There's that auntie that doesn't show up for regular uh family stuff or whatever. She doesn't show up for that, but like the day-to-day family stuff, but she'll come in for the holidays, and she's gonna give hugs, and she's gonna give some awesome gifts, but she don't really fool with people, right? So that's still kind of that play off of that. And then as we get into mental health being trendy, right? People all of a sudden have gained access to the DSM, and they're incorrectly diagnosing themselves. Um, and then we also have the onset of autism and neurodiversity being trendy. And people are incorrectly diagnosing themselves through that. So they're like, oh, well, I don't really make friends easily. I'm autistic and I'm on the spectrum. That's incorrect. We have people who are like, well, I've always been shy and awkward and not great in social situations. I'm on the spectrum. That's incorrect as well. I mean, because it could just very well be the fact that you weren't taught to make friends, you weren't encouraged to make friends. Um, I do remember people in middle school who had, I remember one girl in specific, we didn't understand it at the time, but she had severe social anxiety. And I remember she ended up being homeschooled because of her social anxiety. And she was really, really sweet, but she used to get like super nervous um, when she was in school. But like she would talk to some of us, but then after a minute, she would get like super, super nervous. And this is what middle school for me was. Like late 80s, social anxiety was not. Now as an adult, and um probably heard me moving around just for a second because I had to charge my computer and my laptop up. But now as an adult and as a therapist, I understand she had severe social anxiety. And that was really, really an issue for her. But we didn't have kids who, I mean, like there weren't these diagnoses floating around in that way. That's not necessarily overly misdiagnosed. And so in this day and age, people see one or two symptoms, they grab onto it and claim that as a diagnosis without properly being diagnosed. A lot of people become the terms of introvert and extrovert are highly, highly misused, right? There are some people that consider themselves an extrovert when in reality they just really lack boundaries. You just really lack the ability to have boundaries. So that's not you really just like, oh, I'm so social and I talk to everybody. It's the lack of ability to read the room and understand that you don't have to be in all of those spaces. That doesn't make you an extrovert. That could make you a person who lacks discernment and boundaries. You may not necessarily be an introvert. I have worked with a lot of clients because um I've worked with a lot of clients who are highly sensitive people, right? HSP. And what I find is um people like I'll look at their natal chart and they'll say, yeah, I'm an introvert, but they have mostly fire and air alignments. And I'm like, how are you an introvert? Like, that's a very dynamic energy. Why are you not out? Like, why are you not out amongst the people? Air energy is a connector, it's a liaison. Fire energy is very dominant, very passionate, right? And come to find out, they're more introverted because they don't know how to protect their energy. And so they go out and they lend themselves to a lot of people and a lot of spaces, and then they're drained. And so then they retreat. And it's like retreating and kind of licking your wounds. And because they retreat without the self-care skills, they've shut down. And so then it's like, oh, I'm an introvert. And so that's how you get people who are like, I'm an ambivert. I'm an introverted extrovert. No, you just probably haven't learned how to protect your energy proactively, right? So you can act and so you can show up in the world in your authentic self. And I think that is like a huge crux of the problem for just so many people, is that they're just operating outside of a space of authenticity to their true design. Um and I mean, on top of that, we just have so many things that just we I'm going to use the word assaulted. We are constantly assaulted with everybody's moods, emotions, and thoughts, right? Because everything is update your status. I have WhatsApp on my phone, um, and like you can update your status in WhatsApp, and I'm thinking like I don't even use WhatsApp for that. But like, why do I need your status update? Why do I need stories in WhatsApp? Right. I mean, I guess for people who use that for, internationally, then fine. But like, I'm getting status updates there. Like, so there's this space where you just constantly know what people are thinking. That's overwhelming. You constant like there's sometimes, people are using social media as an online diary. There's stuff and you're like, gosh, why did they share that? And then sometimes even for yourself, you could be thinking, did I overshare? Like, is this too much? And so there are people who it's hard. Like, you have to know how to protect your energy at all times, right? Because there's overwhelm, and then you've also got people who don't post anything. They don't update their status at all. But and they may put a story up or two, but they lurk and they read everybody else's stuff and they comment on everybody else's stuff, but they don't ever post. So they can know everything about you and you can know absolutely nothing about what's going on with them. And so all of these things kind of skew the way that relationships occur, right? And then we've also just come through the wave, which is folding finally now, but we've come through the wave of people who were relationship experts with no real credentials. Um, all they had was a mic and some thoughts. And they weren't sharing those thoughts based on just like, hey, these are just my inner thoughts. These are just my musings and my ramblings. They were sharing these things based on wanting to be presented as a guide, as a guru, and some sort of expert. And then it became obtuse because when you said that, it's like, no, 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 we're just having banter about relationships. But that banter and that back and forth shaped so many things for people. It shaped minds. And so then it got people thinking no one's getting married, everyone's unhappily married. And that's not the truth either. Like, that's not the truth either. People are getting married every day. People are happily married. People are in successful marriages. But those things, it was like an agenda that was based on breaking down not only dating relationships and intimate relationships, but it also, that stuff carried over into family and things like that. We also have, our reality shows where it's hard to tell. It's like, are some of them really friends? Like, there's a point when you watch some of them where they have to say, no, this is actually my friend in real life. We've known each other for X amount of years before the show. Like, they have to really make that clear, because then they introduce somebody who comes in with the storyline and then they do something crazy and you're like, well, why would you do that to a friend? And so our reality is altered because you're thinking, and what they do, what every single reality show, they have some type of trip, right? They have to go on the destination trip. So you're literally packing up all your stuff to go to an exotic destination with people who you really don't spend your day to day with. Like, would you do, I mean, unless you're in a travel club, you're not really going to do that, right? And so then they go overseas to bicker. It's like crazy. So we have all of these things that alter our reality on what it means to connect with other people. And so then you have folks that, I constantly see women that are like, they have a thriving community online, but they don't have friends in real life. And so I'm like, well, what do you do? I mean, even, and this is, and I'm not saying everybody has to go to church, but when you go to church, people tap you, they hug you. The church mother is going to hug you. Well, I'm talking about the Black church. I don't know about any other church, but in the Black church, the church mothers, they're going to come over with their church hats and they're going to hug you. They're going to tap you. When you go down for prayer, they touch you. They lay hands on you, right? And so there's a hug. I always ask people too, the things that you're requiring from other people, do you do that, right? Because I'm a hugger, and huggers find other huggers, right? So sometimes I have to say in certain situations, like, oh, I'm a hugger. Like, but that's weird to me. Even like in this day and age, you have to kind of announce that in order for it to be okay. Because some people use hugs to weaponize and just come in and do really creepy things or whatever. But if you kind of announce like, hey, I'm a hugger, then it's like, okay, mutually we see each other. But most people who hug like kind of go in to do that anyway. You know what I mean? So if you are a hugger, right? Where, like, are you going out? Are you talking to other people? Have you created these spaces for yourself instead of thinking that the space is going to show up and serve you? Have you created the space by going out and expanding yourself to even get into spaces where you can show up with people who have mutual energy? Because the key is that, like, you can't be like, oh, I'm full of light, I'm full of love, and I haven't been hugged or touched or loved, but you haven't gone out to spread any of that. Like, if you're just waiting for it to come to you, are you truly light, love, and a hugger? Because those people who truly are authentically that are going to go out in the world and just spread that, right? Now, this conversation also takes in account that people have been through certain situations. and certain actual traumas, because when you hear the word trauma come out of my mouth, it's never based on the internet pop psychology version of it. I'm talking about true traumas. So yeah, those folks aren't going to do that, but they're going to seek the the vulnerable spaces that are comfortable for them, right? Because if they're properly addressing those traumas through proper therapeutic channels, then that helps you to learn how to balance and set boundaries and understand how to advocate for yourself, right? So this loneliness epidemic, it's so interesting to me because people have set up for so long that, like, I want friendships, but I don't want to go out. Well, I mean, like, what are you guys doing? you know I have girlfriends, but like, I've seen these posts before. It's like, I have this friend and this friend is doing, and I'm like, but those things that friend that this person is doing aren't, like, that's not what a friend would do. Like, I have this friend, and then they list all of these trifling backstabbing things, and then they're like, what do you think I should do? Well, that's not your friend, so let's operate from there, right? People not knowing how to correctly identify friendships, how to correctly like understand, like, this person is an associate. Your friends show up for you. Your friends are there for you as you are there for them, right? And none of these caveats about, like, well, people are using it. No, when we incorrectly assert all these negative attributes into a situation, then we're not talking about friendship. If you start to label off all the negative things, then that is no longer a friendship. And that's where we have to be with this, because we'll be less into this lonely epidemic when we actually acknowledge that. The other part is understanding that you can't just keep wanting these things from other people and you don't give them, because then you're actually part of the problem. So when you have people that are like, oh, I don't have, they're like, I don't have any friends, or I don't, and I'm like, well, but are you a friend? And then the conversation gets nasty. When I say, but, are you a friend? Are you willing to show up? Oh, I've shown up for other people, and I've done all these things for other folks, and okay. But so then it kind of jades you, because you think, oh, I've done these things for other people and I didn't get it in return. Well, but friendships are reciprocal. Maybe that thing that they're giving you is not the thing that you gave them, but they're giving you something, right? And so I don't know. It just, seeing those original posts just kind of made me think, like, are we actually seeing the correlation here, between the fact that for so long everybody said, you know I don't have to show up, I don't have to call, I don't have to put in any effort, I don't have to do any of those things, but I still want a friendship. It's the thing that gets me about dating. The relationships go downhill because from the jump the person gave you bare minimum and required your presence. They gave you bare minimum and you still showed up. So what do you think you're going to get the rest of the time? We've gotten our relationships and our connections to the point where they're very bare minimum and very surface. And then people are upset that there's no depth. It's like you danced on the surface all that time and then you looked under the table and nothing was there. We got to start leading with looking underneath. And then, the surface stuff is great, but that stuff fades. We got to start leading with what's underneath. But the way that you lead with what's underneath is that you are aware of your depth and you're willing to put yours out there. But we've gotten to this point where emotions are so fragile that people don't want to feel them. And so that has led us to these surface things. We're not supposed to not feel our emotions. We're supposed to feel them, process them, and work through them. So now we have trigger warnings for everything. And, everybody's like, oh, I'm so triggered. I can't deal with that. I can't see that. Well, yeah, some things are traumatizing and you don't need to rehash them. But for the most part, the stuff that people are saying is traumatizing and triggering, and I don't want to deal with this. And it has led us here. It's led us to isolation. It's led us to people not knowing how to be vulnerable or where to be vulnerable. It's led to less intimacy in our connections because people just dance on the surface for fear of being hurt or fear. There is stress in every relationship. There is struggle everywhere. So people are like, oh, I can't struggle. No, Buddha tells us that struggle is part of life. It's just part of the living experience. That's it. It's just part of it. You can't avoid it. You can manage it. You can move through it. But I mean, things are going to happen. There's also good stress, right? So good stress is graduating from a school program, moving out on your own, having a new baby, starting a new job. That's a good stress. A stress is simply a change in the environment, like a marked change in the environment. That's all stress is. Stress is not all negative. There's really good stressors. But we don't look at things like that. We've attuned to the station of doom and gloom. And so now, we are living in a product of a mindset that was cultivated. So what do we do? Right? Because I've rambled long enough about like what is actually going on. What do we do? I think it's important to and it always starts with self, and I know people hate hearing that. I know they hate hearing the stress around that. I know they hate hearing that, and it gets stressful for people to hear that, and they feel like it's cliche. But the thing is, you can't connect properly with other people when you are not connected to yourself. If you're not honest with yourself about your strengths and your shortcomings and the amount of depth that you're capable of, then you cannot properly go and ask for that from someone else, because then you're mad when someone does that to you. If someone was to come to you and demand and require a level of depth and vulnerability from you that they're not willing to give, it's a problem. But then when you go out and you are like, I need this, and someone's not willing to give it, then it's more of a problem. No. And the thing is, when you put yourself at that point where you're like, these are the things that I'm going to require. I'm going to require the romance. I'm going to require the boundaries. I'm going to require the intellect. I'm going to require all those things. You will attract a little bit of everything. But if you are set on your requirements, your discernment is going to kick in, or should kick in. So you're not accepting the other things, right? Because it's like attracts like, right? So like I said before, like most huggers are going to find other huggers. But on the same respect, people are always like, well, I'm tightening up and I'm on my spiritual journey and la 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 la. You can still attract a court jester. The thing is, you should have more discernment to see the court jester and be like, that's just recreation, that's just for fun, and then you leave that as surface, right? If you choose to indulge. The thing is, you'll have the discernment to just be like, that's not where I'm at right now. I don't want any of that. I really want this thing over here. And you're going to focus your energy on that. I'm lonely. I want friendships. I want spaces where people hug and love and show joy. So, what do you have to do? You have to show up in some semblance of joy so you can better accept the joy that they give you. Because guess what? Nobody is going to knock you down and beg you to give you joy. They're going to be like, she don't want it. I'm done. Because nobody has to do that. So you are going to be in a better space to be like, I can accept this joy because I can recognize it. And that's going to open and expand you, right? And so then there's going to be a mutually serving place, not a place where you get filled and you don't fill others. That part is going to be key. The other thing is, I mean, and it's not like avoiding people who can't connect, but it's more like you will be aware of how much energy you give to those spaces and you lend to those spaces. If everybody, and I say this all the time, if everybody is kind of working on themselves, then you present as a more full version of yourself in the spaces that you expect to serve you. And the more full we present in those spaces, that turns the tide of our relationships. And we don't have to have a loneliness epidemic. I think the last part of that is, understanding what really resonates with your soul and why. Because I mean, we all resonate with some really low vibrational stuff from time to time, because that's just the human experience. I mean, look, I like petty places. I like stuff where there's a little pinch of petty going on because I'm petty and I resonate with that. And I mean, God is working on me sometimes about that. And then sometimes, God is just like, that girl's going to be over there being petty. So I am not even touching that. It's a thing, right? And so we all resonate with certain things for certain reasons. The key is to be able to look at that and understand what that's about. For me, I resonate with petty because I have a disruptor personality. And sometimes you need to be a little petty to disrupt certain situations because that's what you're designed to do. Right. And so, but then I have to find the balance between that and understand when my petty is working for good and when my petty is working for negative. And so, and that's going to be key, because if I let myself live in the space where my petty is working for negative, then I attract trolls and I attract other people who are using it for negative. When my pettiness allows me to drop truth bombs and educate people, then it's working for good. And I'm really working authentically in my disruptor archetype. So we have more to talk about. I just wanted to kind of drop this one. And I'm dropping these from time to time. Let it serve as a therapy session for you. If you want to do some journaling from this perspective, I'm going to drop some journal points in the links for you. This will also be on healing through sacred writing. I think I'm going to possibly post it there under mental health matters. And so there'll be some journal prompts there too. Make sure you like and share. You can definitely, if you're watching this on YouTube, drop some things for me in the comments so I know what you're thinking and I know what resonated with you. And join me later with Mental Health Matters on the next topic.